Let's get sweaty.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Shenmue Dojo Interviews. I'm really excited with the guest I have on today. Back in 2018, you may remember a Kickstarter project called A Gamer's Journey, which was funded completely through Kickstarter to document the history of Shenmue. As that project now comes to a close with backer awards almost on the way, I am excited to announce that my guest today is Adam Sipione, creator of A Gamer's Journey, the definitive history of Shenmue. So, Adam, welcome to the dojo. How are you doing on this fine Saturday?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to talking with you. It's been a while.
It has, and I'm really pleased to get you on. I know I asked you a few months back as things were sort of rounding off. I'm glad to get you on the show at long last. You've been on my list for a little while.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, no, happy to be here.
Excellent. So I'm going to dive straight into our questions. Firstly, can you give me a sort of a journey of how you came into sort of making films and the industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wish I could like confidently say that I'm in the industry. I think it's more I started out, went to film school, kind of picked it up, started as a hobby, went to film school to kind of like hone in on certain
Yeah.
aspects of filmmaking. Spent just like a good early portion of my professional career just kind of doing freelance stuff. Really like whatever jobs I can get, but kind of eventually fell into an area where I was like doing essentially like corporate documentaries in a way, like documentaries without a super interesting subject, but that involved a lot of like packing up a backpack of gear, traveling to places, interviewing people, talking to people, editing things like that together, and then creating like little short videos. Started out boring, but then it escalated to like more exciting stuff. My first kind of taste with documentary filmmaking was I had the opportunity to go to South Africa back in like 2014 for a couple weeks doing a short documentary there, and that kind of was like my first foray into like proper filmmaking. And yeah, that's kind of how it all started, and then it's just been whatever kind of steady work I could get since then. But a couple years ago, I realized I was getting a little too old for the freelance life, like on a full-time basis. So, and once I got married and we had a kid on the way, I was like, I think I need something a bit more stable and less adventurous. And yeah, so I kind of put that behind me. But Shenmue was the one thing that I was like, no matter what I'm doing, this is like my passion project that I want to see through. So
Brilliant, beautiful. And you've already sort of touched on being a video games fan. So sort of how did you get into video games and your favorite consoles before you discovered Shenmue?
oh right, yeah, I've been playing video games since like my earliest memory with video games I think was the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad coming home with like a burlap sack full of like loose cartridges. And he's like, "Hey, I got these for the Nintendo." And I was like 5 or 6 years old at the time. First game I have like vivid memories playing was Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo. But that quickly turned into, I guess, what my parents probably thought was like a passing fad to like a full blown obsession. So, big Nintendo fan growing up. But along the way, I think I owned or borrowed pretty much every single major console, and just it never went away. I just kind of kept gaming. I was playing Elden Ring before we chatted today. I'm still kind of
Beautiful.
on the cusp of all things going on video games. So yeah.
Excellent. And when did you first come across Shenmue, and how did you come across it?
That's an interesting question because it's something I've told the story a few times to some people in passing, but I remember it very vividly because it kind of did. And not to sound too cliche, but it did change my life. Like it changed many of our lives.
Yeah.
But I was maybe 12 years old,
Hmm.
and I actually discovered Shenmue for the first time on the Xbox, the Shenmue 2 for the Xbox. So just to preface it really quick, I have an older brother, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an older sibling or not.
I don't.
So if you do, that kind of dictates the video game console that you're going to have in the house. Because if my older brother wanted an Xbox or wanted a PlayStation, that's what we got as a family. Um,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
around that time as the console, he was like, "We're getting an Xbox," so we had the Xbox. And before that, it was Nintendo. So we kind of bypassed the Sega Dreamcast and all the Sega consoles altogether. So I didn't know what Shenmue was. But one day he came home with a bunch of video games he rented from the video store,
Yeah.
and I remember seeing Shenmue 2, and I was like, "Oh, the box art looks really cool." It's it takes place in Hong Kong, but it's clearly like a Japanese developer game.
Yeah.
And I put it in and I watched that little digest movie that came with the first one to kind of catch me up on the story, because I'm the kind of person who, like, I don't just dive into a game. I want to like know what's going on if there's a story. And I just got hooked. I just kept playing that game. Like, I would go to school, come home, play for like 3-4 hours at a time every single day. And then after a week, he brought it back to the video store, and I was like, "Hey, what happened to? You have to get that game back. Like, why did you bring it back?" And he goes, "Oh, that stupid like Chinese game. Like, I don't want that. That's so lame. It's so boring. You don't do anything." I'm like, "Oh no, you're so wrong. You're so wrong." So I like made my dad go to the store, rent it again so I could finish it, and then after that, it's I go through the motions of like tracking down Shenmue 1,
Yeah.
getting a Dreamcast, and the rest is kind of history, as they say.
Yeah. Very much so. And playing Shenmue 2 for the first time, obviously you didn't have the benefit of playing Shenmue 1. Do you think that coloured your experience of the second game so much?
I have nothing but very, very fond memories of Shenmue 2, especially when I first played it. Like, it's still one of my best games or favorite games of all
Yeah.
time. I think I prefer Shenmue 2 over Shenmue 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, not having that experience of playing the first game in full to, where the items carry over, and even just having those relationships that you've built, because the little digest movie that's included only really tells so much.
Yeah, it does.
But I remember just getting so absorbed into the world of Shenmue 2 that when I beat it, like, I immediately had to track down a Dreamcast and a copy of the game, which was not a hard thing to do, or not an easy thing to do, rather, back in those days. It's not like I had money or a job that I could just go on eBay and kind of look. I don't even think eBay was a thing back then. I had to ask around kids at my high school. Luckily, one guy had a Dreamcast and a copy of Shenmue, and he hated it, so he just gave it to me. So yeah, there we go.
Brilliant. You obviously have the cliffhanger ending.
Of course,
What did
of
you think
course.
to the cliffhanger ending? Thinking obviously at this point a third game might be on the way.
Matt, I was so naive, so super, super naive and just jaded. And it was around the time, I think the first time I beat Shenmue 2 was when that infamous Kikizo article was kind of circulating,
Oh
if you
yeah, the
remember
Adam
that one.
Dory one. Yeah.
The Adam Dory. And so I beat Shenmue 2, and this article kind of pops online within like 6 months of me kind of discovering the Shenmue Dojo and hopping onto the forums there.
Yeah.
Might have even been a little longer in between when I beat the game and when I discovered the dojo, but still, I was very optimistic because I'm like, oh, it's right around the corner, it's gonna happen. And yeah, I think I spent the entire 5 years I was at high school, like, going on the internet every single day, being like literally typing in like Shenmue 3 news, Shenmue 3 like updates, stuff like that, thinking that it was going to come, and I held on hope for a very long time.
Well, it came eventually.
It did, yeah. Eventually, what, 15, 20 years later?
15 years later, and actually, I'm trying to get Adam Dory on the show to talk about that, and he hasn't
Yeah,
said no yet. So
yeah. He is a really nice guy. I've chatted with him. He's a stand-up dude. Yeah,
yeah, he's he's still a big Shenmue fan now. Actually, I've
yeah,
spoken to him behind the scenes, and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, he's a sound dude. But if you are listening, Adam, yeah, come on the show. Okay then. So Shenmue 2, you've got the weight and everything. What inspired you to sort of take the step into, do you know what, turning the Shenmue passion into a documentary? What inspired you to do it?
Right. So there was a time between, like, I guess when I started doing it for the very first time, and like when I first started college, there was this maybe like 4 or 5, 6 year gap of when I just kind of like put Shenmue to bed for good.
Yeah.
Not that I was like forsaking it at all. It
Hmm.
was just, okay, you know what, maybe Shenmue 3 is not going to be a thing. I'll get good with it. It'll always be a cherished memory, yada, yada, yada. So I kind of put that in the back of my head. And then, and like I stopped going on the dojo. I just kind of stopped really caring about the future of Shenmue,
Yeah.
so to speak. But then, yeah, like around 2012, I kind of like, I think it was, I don't know how, but I stumbled upon the Shenmue 500K Facebook group.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that kind of like, I was like, oh, I wonder if the Shenmue Dojo is still a thing. And then sure enough, it was. And I'm like, oh my God, like it hasn't changed. Like it's still thriving. So between rediscovering the Shenmue Dojo and Shenmue 500K, I just started participating in like conversations more on Facebook. I hadn't really made an account on the dojo. I was more of a lurker,
Yeah.
but on 500K, I was kind of participating in discussions and, just kind of seeing all these people that I really thought didn't exist when I was younger. Because as far as I know, I was the only one who played these games. I hadn't been in touch with anybody, but yeah, just seeing the passion of people on 500K, and especially doing like the tweetathons and making those like banners with like everybody holding up
Yeah.
a letter, all super inspiring stuff. And then I just thought like, well, like with the work I do, I've kind of like built up a little arsenal of like video equipment, not like amateur equipment too. Like it was pretty, mid
Yeah.
pro streamer level stuff that I'm like, okay, I like, why don't I just try to talk to some people about Shenmue and like do what I'm doing for work, but like make it about Shenmue and just make something that I actually want to do instead of something I'm just like doing for a living, to put food on the table kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was kind of it. I thought like if I could use like the resources and the talents that I have to tell this story about Shenmue, like it would be a nice little like love letter to the fans and to the series, and something that I can maybe put out there and be like, hey, look, like people are still trying to get this third game made, and here's my contribution to this effort. Like that was basically how it started.
Brilliant. And I remember your first trailer. I remember sitting there in awe of it, thinking,
Which
okay,
one was that? I put out so many, I can't remember which one that was. Was it in the
oh,
bedroom?
it was the one in the bedroom with the disc going into the Dreamcast.
Yes, yeah, that was fun. I guess
I,
that was the first official thing we
I
put
love
out.
that. Love that
Oh,
trailer.
thanks. Yeah,
That
that was fun.
I could just hear the Dreamcast whirring away in my head,
That's
about to explode.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. We ended up shooting some behind the scenes content. And I don't actually know what happened to that footage, which is kind of a shame. I must have forgot to back it up just because with all the things that were going on. But that day was fun. I was having everything come together. I think in that opening shot, there's all those little Easter eggs of like Shenmue things. So there's like capsule
Yeah.
toys that I got at like my local pizza shop. There's a Shenmue jacket that Marcin actually loaned me. He
Okay. Yeah.
mailed me that from Chicago. There was the Heavens lighter, or the Heavens Zippo lighter.
Yeah.
And just yeah, just getting everything ready for that shoot was so much fun. It's so cool just to think about after all these years.
The nostalgia in that shot, in that trailer is immense. And actually, I will play a sample of it for anybody who's watching this on YouTube, so you can see what we're on about and be awe inspired by it. Because it was, I remember my jaw dropping, thinking, "Holy hell, this
Oh
looks
wow.
amazing!" I was really pumped. Now, obviously, this is before Shenmue 3, so what was sort of the outline that you had in terms of this documentary? What were you going to cover before the whole Shenmue 3 announcement obviously changed everything?
Right. So back then, and I forget at what point in the timeline we shot that trailer, but I'm pretty sure that trailer was like well before Shenmue 3 was announced.
Mm,
Um, but when I first started it, I think the plan was to just kind of network with people
yeah,
on 500K who were like fans local to my area.
yeah,
It started with I don't know, I won't name her last name, but Amy was her name, who was a fan from Toronto. That I'm like, I'm gonna start here because like she lives very close to me and she's a Shenmue fan, so I'll just talk to her
yeah.
about Shenmue. And then that was one interview, and that kind of organically led to like other fans, and I had a few acquaintances that wrote for who are like published writers in
Hmm.
magazines and like video game magazines.
Yeah.
was kind of talking to them, and that evolved into like, well, maybe I could like reach out to some of the English voice actors, and maybe I could reach out to some of these popular YouTubers like Adam Korlick,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the time, who I thought if I can get Adam Korlick and Corey Marshall and Lisa Wilkerson and like a handful of other fans, I would be happy. I'd be thrilled, and this would be a really cool like 20 some odd minute video I could put on YouTube that's kind of just like a little love letter to the fans and the community, saying like, hey, we want Shenmue 3. That's how it started. And that, like, back then the scope was like very small. It was kind of limited to just that. I didn't really think it would evolve into what it ultimately did.
yeah. And obviously, Shenmue 3 played a big part in that. So you're planning this documentary out, you're shooting things as you go. We hit 2015 E3, the
Hmm.
forklift tweet. Did that set alarm bells ringing for you?
So you know what's funny? Every E3 leading up to that one, I watched in the hopes that Shenmue 3 was gonna be a thing.
Yeah,
And that was the only one where I was like, I was just convinced that there was going to be no mention of Shenmue. And I'm like, I'm already, like, I'm doing this documentary. There's no point in watching E3. Like, it's probably not going to happen. Like, I'll just, whatever, it's fine. That was like the one I made the conscious decision to, like, it's fine. I'll catch the highlights the next day. So I
yeah.
didn't even see the forklift tweet. And
Okay.
the way I heard about this announcement was like my phone started blowing up. I was getting all these notifications by people just typing the letter 3 and sending it to me. I'm like, who are, like, what is going on? And then yeah, that's how it happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how far into production were you of this documentary at that point?
Well, we had a bunch of stuff shot, but we didn't really have like an actual cohesive assembly edit together.
Yeah,
So it was really just footage and in our heads, like, okay, here's the direction it's going, and this is kind of what we're gonna do. And then when the announcement happened, my first reaction was I called Randall, and I was like, it's like, oh, like this is bad. This completely ruined, like, from a filmmaking perspective. From a fan perspective, I was over the moon, but from a
yeah,
filmmaking perspective, I'm like this is awful. Like, Shenmue 3 got made. Like, what's the point of doing what we're doing? And now it's happening, and we don't need to do this. And he goes, no, this is good. Like, we're in the middle of all of this now. Like, there's a story we could tell. And he kind of convinced me, because I was just so stuck in my head that we're doing a documentary about a game that never happened. And that was like the emotional backing to the whole thing, was this thing that was wanted that never came to be. And when it happened, yeah, Randall was just like, no, we're exactly where we need to be, and we're in a great position to tell this awesome story.
fantastic. So, how did it change the scope? I mean, I'm going to talk about sort of the Kickstarter dinner in a minute as well, obviously, because you
Mhm.
attended that with Peter. But how did that change your initial scope of the project from what was essentially a love letter to now a story, a long story?
It grew by opening doors that I didn't think would open to us.
Yeah,
Like, I guess we'll touch on it eventually, but yeah, like I think kind of shortly after that happened, I think is when maybe we put some sort of a trailer together that we never actually released on YouTube. We made like a pitch, totally separate pitch video that we sent to Yu Suzuki and his team,
yeah,
basically being like, hey, like, this is who, when I say we, I mean like Faux Pot Media, which is, that's Mark and Randall and Isaac's company.
yeah,
um,
yeah,
and I'm just a fan who's kind of like working with them on this project. But like, this is who we are, this is what we've done in the past. They sent them like sizzle reels of their other films, and basically Randall and I were on camera, talking about what we want to do and how we want to work with them, while we were showing them like sample interviews and things like that of what we've done so far. And that was just kind of like the Hail Mary pass. I think Corey Marshall put us in touch with somebody because he had been in contact about potentially doing some voices for Rio and Shenmue 3.
yeah.
And that was our in. And yeah, like, we just put that out there. And as soon as we got an email back saying like, okay, yeah, like, we're happy to work with you, like, what do you need, that was when the scope like officially changed to like this big thing that I didn't think would be possible.
Yeah, I remember you saying you eventually ended up going to Wisenet, etc. So,
Hmm.
so it sort of feeds in quite nicely to the Kickstarter. Then obviously you went with Peter Campbell, who obviously used to own the dojo and is a huge Shenmue fan. how did that open those doors with Wisenet, Yu Suzuki, and again, how did that feed into the project and the planning of the project?
Right. It was all kind of timed around a really good time. So we had heard back from Wisenet. They were like, yeah, like we're I think that they were very blunt and direct, but it was like, yeah, like we're excited. Can you come to Japan? And that's not just, you don't just throw that out to to somebody,
No,
right? Like
no,
that's a big thing.
yeah,
But the offer was there, and that was shortly around the time when Peter and I had started chatting. Like once I put the trailer out there, Peter reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I'm Peter Campbell. I don't know if you know, I do this at the dojo and blah blah blah." And we just kind of clicked. We're very like Peter and I, and he just kind of like floated the idea by me. I think we were talking one day, and he was like, in mid conversation, he was like, "Okay, like you're kind of twisting my arm here. Like I wanted to tell you this, uh, at another time, but like I might as well just tell you now because you have this opportunity to go to Japan, but I wanted to ask if you wanted to be my plus one with this thing." And I was like, "Oh my god, like the stars are aligning. Yes, 100% yes. I would love to come because then I'm going into Wisenet and then you can invite me there, and then it's a whole like there's a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing, and it just
yeah.
worked out perfectly."
Wow, and talk me through a little bit of your experience of the Kickstarter Japan tour and the dinner, etc.
I'll tell you what I could remember. It's
Yeah,
kind of hazy, but like the
that's
bits and
fine.
pieces are very very clear. Um, I guess, what did you want to know? Where should I start? It was a very wild 2 weeks.
Ooh, start at the beginning. With like meeting Yu Suzuki, the tour of Dobita Street, etc. Start there.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I arrived in Japan. I actually caught a flight with two of the guys, George and Joe Kitchen,
Oh yeah, of
who they
course.
were their connecting flight was in Toronto, and they were connecting on the same flight I was taking over. So we had kind of met before arriving in Japan, and we were talking. They were great guys, and then when we got there, the four of us, we were just kind of doing all sorts of things together, just like seeing the city, seeing the sights, going to a lot of bars, and just kind of anticipation for this trip that we were going to go on. But
Yeah,
we ended up going to Wisenet before that. And when I say we, that was just Peter and I exclusively, just because he was with me. And I was like, okay, you invited me to Japan, so like literally the very least I can do is get you to come along with me with that. And which is good because Peter is actually like an integral part of the documentary. So there's um, like footage of Peter, his
yeah,
experience as a fan going through it. So it all worked out great. But going to Wisenet for the first time was amazing. Kind of mind boggling, but then the shock of it quickly dies down when you realize that it's just a bunch of people like working in a room. So like you have this wave of excitement, and then you're like, oh yeah, like this guy is waiting for his lunch break, and that person over there probably like doesn't want to be at work right now, and he would rather be doing, what I mean? It's just another
yeah,
day at the office for these guys. But it was really cool just being in it and seeing it. And then of course once Yu Suzuki was kind of showing me like the binders of previous artworks and stuff like that, because he knew that, okay, you're doing a documentary, like why don't you get some shots of this and get some shots of this, and here I'll show you some things that we had worked on before. So he was kind of nice enough to give me that as like a little preliminary, knowing that we would come back eventually, because at that point it was just me.
yeah.
This was like well before we brought the whole crew over. So yeah, that was like, it was the first time we went to Wisenet. It was very brief, but it was really like an unforgettable experience for Peter and I both. And then the dinner was, that's the hazy part, really. It was the dinner was the part I don't really remember because it was just a total blur. But the first time the four of us went, the four of us plus Alex Munoz, who lives in Japan,
Yeah.
the five of us went to Dobuita and Yokosuka. That was like one of the coolest things I've ever done. Just kind of going there together and doing all sorts of the things that like outsiders who are looking at us would think that we're crazy, but like why is everybody taking a picture of this guy buying a toy, or why is he taking a selfie of him drinking a Coke out of a vending machine, right? Like we probably just look like absolute like weirdos, but it was like probably one of like I'd say that and then my wedding day were like and the birth of my daughter, three of the best experiences of my life.
Brilliant. I love it. And the Shenmue pilgrimage is something that I haven't done yet. I'm going to do it one day.
It's amazing. You'll never forget it. It's so much fun.
I'm jealous of everybody who's done it, and I can add in some of the anime places now as well. But
Yes, exactly. Which like I don't know if we're gonna touch on the anime, but I love it.
oh, we
Oh,
will.
it's so good.
It's stunning. The anime. I'm thoroughly impressed about it. I could talk about it for hours. But we'll touch the anime in a bit. Okay, so you've met Yu Suzuki. You've been out and done the Kickstarter dinner. You've sort of started building your bridges. How did then the project grow from there, and how did the idea of going over to Kickstarter surface, and whose idea was it?
It was actually, believe it or not, Harry Morishida, who he was kind of like our main contact with Wisenet.
Yeah.
I guess he's like a acquaintance or a close friend of Yu Suzuki, who was kind of like our fixer during
Mm-hmm.
this whole operation. And we were just talking about like, yeah, like I think he was kind of like, oh yeah, we're gonna be doing this with the game, and maybe it would be good if you can get some footage of this now. And basically, we were like, oh, this is all well and good, but like we have like jobs and bills to pay. Like it's kind of hard to just uproot our lives and go to Japan for a few weeks to do all this stuff. So like financially, we were in a bit of a pickle, and we
Yeah.
weren't trying to like go to Yu Suzuki and them for money. Like it wasn't like, oh, can you fund the documentary for us? It was just we wanted to figure out how we could make it work within the time frame. And that's when Harry was like, hey, have you tried Kickstarter? Like we had really good success with it. And I was so hesitant about doing Kickstarter because like that's how that worked for Shenmue 3, and I just didn't want the community to make it seem like I didn't want to make it seem to the community that we were just like piggybacking off of Shenmue's success. And at that time, there was still the Slacker Backer campaign going on, and I'm like, man, I would not sit right with me if the Shenmue 3 was doing a Slacker Backer to get more funding, and then here I come out where I'm like, hey, like you want to give us money for this thing that you could also be giving to Shenmue 3, because that was kind of what the direction was. Like everyone was contributing as much as they could to this project, so I
Yeah.
didn't want to steal that thunder at all. And that's why there was such a big gap between like when we put that trailer out until once the Slacker Backer campaign was done. Then I was like, okay, we've exhausted a bunch of options with trying to secure financing here, so let's go to Kickstarter. And that's how it happened.
Brilliant. And did the success of the Kickstarter sort of take you by surprise? I mean, because it got funded really quickly. I remember correctly. If I remember correctly, I remember seeing your sort of Kickstarter pitch video and thinking, "Well, that's getting funded in about 10 minutes." I was sat in my car watching it just before a work meeting. I remember it vividly. It was a really hot day as well, and I was sat there
Yeah.
waiting for that Kickstarter to open so I could back it like immediately as soon as you announced it was going. And I know
Oh,
there's
amazing.
a lot of us out there. I was sat there waiting, literally refreshing my phone every few seconds. So did it take
Oh,
you by
wow.
surprise that it got funded so quickly?
Yeah, I can't quite remember. Like I remember well no, I don't remember. I know that just as a personality trait that I have is I'm a very like pessimistic, always looking at, you know what I mean? Like if I always is self-doubting what I'm able to do, always looking on like that, this isn't going to work. Nobody's going to care about this. That's who I am as a person. So I was like, I'm going to put this out there, probably going to flop and my life's going to be ruined. But Peter was the one assuring me, he's like, no, mate, like this is going to be huge. Like we will help you with this. Like, don't worry. So Peter was the one reassuring me.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he was right. And it took off, and I was like totally blown away that it was funded as quick as it was. And yeah, and then that's when things start getting real. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's when we first spoke actually back in the
Yep.
day. I think I
Yep.
hadn't been on the staff that long, and I remember
Yes, I
reaching out,
that,
going, "What do you need?"
right, yes, that was right when the kind of Peter was not stepping down, but taking taken a back seat or kind of transitioning, I guess would be the term.
Yeah, because a lot of I was running the Facebook at the time, and then there was James running the Twitter with a few other people as well. I remember
Hmm.
that it was the first time we spoke. I remember saying, right, what do you need? Updates, whatever. It can go on our pages. I
Yeah,
was so keen. I was glad it was funded. It was never not going to get funded in my head, quite honestly.
yeah.
But you funded, you've got the money. Then, as you say, it gets real. How can you talk me through the planning process of, right, you've got the Kickstarter money and getting yourselves organized and set to go out to Japan?
Hmm. Well, like I guess like most projects with money behind it, like a budget needed to kind of happen, and the budget in this case was like, okay, the bulk of this is going to be accommodation and a plane ticket for everyone who needs to go for as
Yeah,
long as we need to go for. Um, that was like the big chunk, and then obviously you need to set aside some other things for like random contingencies that are unforeseen, and everything else like after the fact for fulfillment and whatnot. But yeah, we kind of broke it down quickly into like, okay, we only have so long to kind of act on this budget, so
yeah.
let's look at what a plane ticket would cost, and finding accommodations and kind of budgeting for like a day a per diem just for meals and stuff. Unfortunately, Tokyo is one of the more expensive cities to kind of just like operate in
Yeah.
day by
Okay.
day. So we're just trying to be as not frugal, but like as realistic as we could, trying to make everything work. So that was the challenging part because I never really budgeted for things like that before. It was all foreign to me. But between Randall and I, he has more experience doing it. We kind of made a plan and we just executed as soon as we could, because I don't think there was very much lull between when it was fun. I mean, there was maybe 3 or 4 months between when it was funded versus when we went, because we went December, I believe, of that year.
Do you remember it being fairly swift from the Kickstarter? I think, yeah,
Yeah.
3 4 months does sound about right in my mind. I remember you
Hmm.
putting an update to say you were getting on the plane, and then another update to say you were in Japan and getting ready. How many of you went out there?
It was myself, Randall, Isaac, who is he's the cinematographer, and his younger brother Ruben, who was basically like the DIT slash grip slash assistant general, like whatever needed. So just the four of us. And when we got there, we spent a lot of time with Joel Tess from
Yeah,
Awesome Japan. He was
great
our
guy, great
yeah,
guy,
he's
Joel.
really really solid dude. He was our translator and kind of guide, and we also met up with, I don't know if he likes to have his name out there, but Switch from Phantom Riverstone. I'm not sure
Well, it's
if
out there now. No, we plug Switch quite a lot, so it's fine. Thinking about, obviously you get into Wisenet and you're getting ready to film. What was your plan in Wisenet? What were you looking to see there? What were you wanting to film there? And were there any surprises when you got there?
the plan before the Kickstarter and after the Kickstarter, there was like what we set out to do originally was kind of different than what ended up happening when we got there, just because we saw like, okay, this is what we're able to get and what we're able to see, and like this is the direction we want to take. But when we got there, we really quickly worked with Joel and Yu Suzuki to be like, we want to interview as many people as humanly possible that we can in like these 3.5 weeks that we're here. So we put together a list of, I remember they sent me a list. It was like a spreadsheet of a ton of names. And beside each name was like their role, what they did, and also like a rating system from like
Okay.
0 stars to 5 stars about who they thought was like most important versus like least important. I think is kind of, they were like, oh, you should talk to this person and this person maybe not so much. So I took their suggestions, and then I think there was a couple like 2 stars on their list that I'm like, no, I want these to be 5 stars, please and thank you. And we just kind of put together a big interview list, um, and then we between Randall and I, we were asking questions. Joel was translating, and we were just having conversations with these people over the course of a couple days, and not just at Wisenet too, but that involved us going to the Sega studios and some other like small independent studios that are owned by like former acquaintances of Yu Suzuki, people who worked on the original games.
Now, I remember when you did the Kickstarter sample video. I can't remember what year it was now. 2020, is that right?
No, it was before COVID happened, I think. I don't know
I
actually.
can't remember. I'll correct it
I
on
want to say 2019, but you also might have a better memory than I do. So,
I whenever it was.
yeah.
It doesn't matter when, but whenever it was, I will check. Um, I remember you saying, obviously, you did some work at Sega. Was that particularly difficult getting hold of people who were still at Sega at the time, or was it pretty straightforward?
I thought it would be difficult. I thought it wouldn't happen, and we were just kind of casting a big net, and we were going to get whoever we got, and we would be thankful that we did.
Yeah,
But yeah, we ended up getting two people at Sega, and that they suggested, oh yeah, you can just go to Sega and interview them. And other than like they obviously were accompanied by like Sega staff who I think just wanted to sit in and make sure maybe they weren't like we make sure they weren't like divulging any company secrets or saying anything negative about the company just in case they thought that we might go down like a really slanderous line of questioning or
yeah,
something like that,
fair enough.
which we never did.
No,
It was all laughs, like everyone was great, but yeah, it was like we had our guides, we were accompanied, they took us up to whatever floor we went up to. Really cool building. They had like all this like a little Sega museum in the hallways. That was
nice.
awesome. They were very like please don't take pictures. So I didn't unfortunately sneak any just because I wanted to be on my best behavior. But it was really cool. We got some Sega swag to take home as like a little thank you. But yeah, that was actually a part that I don't really think about often. But one of the highlights of that trip definitely was going to Sega and chatting with I believe it was Takanobu Mitsuyoshi and Eigo Kasahara at the Sega HQ.
Wow, I'm jealous of that Sega museum that you've seen.
Yeah, it was definitely something I didn't think I would find myself in.
Brilliant. Um, Going back to sort of Wisenet, then, can you sort of talk me through some of your favourite moments filming at Wisenet, or any standout moments from your time there?
Nothing too particular. I think the most exciting moments was um, when we were getting B-roll of like stuff, so
Yeah,
not just the interviews but just getting like that supplemental footage. And Yu Suzuki had this big binder of like all of the characters from Shenmue 1, and in there was like that a drawing that was done like kind of like a rendering, and then next to that was like a chart that was basically a bio of that character, and he
yeah,
was kind of showing us like, okay, like here's a picture of this person and this is their name, their age, where they work, and then he was even going in, and this is not something that I don't even remember that were details in the first game, but he was like even like the information like when their wife left them, or stuff like that, and just kind of like going down that rabbit hole of like, yeah, this is how detailed we we made this stuff, which was all really really cool to see.
And I also remember in one of your footage trailers there was a little bit of Baisha we never got in Shenmue 3. There's a very small snippet, about 2 seconds. I think it was in some of your B-roll. Did you see much of the game sort of in development as you were filming?
um yes and no. Yes, in that like we saw lots of stuff like character models,
Yeah,
the maps, the areas, but which was all well and good. But I think without the context to kind of see it through that lens of like how it actually fit in the story, it didn't really feel like major spoilers to me.
yeah.
When I ended up
Okay.
playing the game, it was like, oh, I remember like that's this and that's that. But uh, yeah, it was nothing like, and I think he strategically invited us there at a time when like they weren't doing anything. Like I didn't see anything of Land D or of anything with the Chiu Men or anything like that. I think he made sure to kind of invite us on a very like neutral couple of days.
Fair
which is
enough.
totally fair, which is
Yeah,
very, very
yeah,
fair. Yeah.
absolutely fair because he doesn't want to spoil things. And obviously, doesn't want things getting out that
Hmm.
that probably shouldn't at the time.
I remember one thing that I will say that just in terms of like things getting out that probably shouldn't have got out was somebody on YouTube like took uh like literally like a 1.5 second video clip from that trailer of Rio running,
Yeah,
and then they looped it for like 10 minutes and zoomed in on it, and they were like, oh, like exclusive footage that we got of Rio running. And I'm like, oh shit, like I hope this doesn't get us in trouble, because I don't know, if I didn't realize that was like a big deal, but apparently it was like a never before seen thing. And I remember just being really nervous, being like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Like they kind of told us that it was okay to show all this footage because we showed it beforehand, but I guess they didn't really care. But the person who looped that video thought it was really awesome. So
I mean, it's typical of Shenmue fans. Any sort of glimmer of
yeah,
anything, it is
yeah,
dissected and dissected again, put back together, dissected one more time just to make sure that you haven't missed anything. That's very typical of Shenmue fans. I do remember that footage as well. Actually, I was thinking,
yeah,
oh, Rhea running, okay.
yeah, yeah,
And the Baisha 2 loops as well, which obviously didn't make it into the game, unfortunately. But I remember seeing those at the time, thinking, okay, this is going to be awesome. It looks really, really good.
yeah.
But I think one of the things with your documentaries, obviously, you did a lot of work in Japan. You've rounded off. You've done all your work. I think what people sometimes forget, it's not just the shooting in Japan. There's a lot that goes on afterwards. So can you talk me through sort of what else in terms of the things you shot outside of Japan, at home, or getting
Hmm.
all the B-roll together? What were the next steps after you went to Japan?
So yeah, like you're exactly right. It's not just you go to Japan for 3 weeks and then you make a film based on those 3 weeks. It's things like um putting together like an asset list of all this archival stuff of Shenmue 1 and 2, and not just like clips of the game,
Yeah,
but you're looking at like videos from past E3s, or like maybe like old newscasts about the Dreamcast or things like that, right? Like basically anything that's relevant to Shenmue, we're building an asset library you have to pull from.
yeah, of
Um,
course.
and then even getting all those interviews translated and subtitled to English to where we could actually work with them took a very long time. Like it's like Brett did a great job translating them. Oh, I said his name. Whoops.
That's all right.
But he did a great job translating them. Did it really quickly. But then like us lining up everything and linking everything and getting the subtitles to kind of like to show up and be on cue with the video, and then having all that done, and then you go, okay, now we could edit. That was a lot of work. And then there's the visual things that Isaac brought to the table, to where uh, when you I guess when Fopop and Definitive Films, when they do a documentary, they're not just using like still images as cutaways, right? They're trying to make it as dynamic as possible. So
Yeah.
that trailer that you mentioned earlier with the room with the Dreamcast and the
Hmm.
camera kind of
Hmm.
like panning through the bed, we did um, more of that, where we're setting up like different sets that are reminiscent of the game. The big one being, we tried to kind of like recreate Rio's living room with
Yeah.
like the TV and the Dreamcast and the walls in the background, like that sort of things that we could then, instead of just like when we're talking about the Genesis, we don't just throw up a picture of the Genesis or just a video of a Genesis on a table, but we've like built these sets that make sense, and like they're visually lending itself to the story. Um, not They're not just there for the sake of being there, but it's all kind of working in this like cohesive whole. So we did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Even like tracking down like certain arcade machines and then setting them up in a space and lighting that and shooting that. They just like take time, and it's again, we had the Kickstarter budget to do so, but it's not like if we just said, hey Isaac, here's your daily rate for what it would normally cost you, we would fly through our budget. Like we were saving the budget for things we absolutely needed to spend on, and it was just sweat equity that we were all putting in like when we could and when we were able to do these things. So kind of why took so long, why things move at the pace they do.
Yeah, and that's fair. I remember one trailer. You did the the antique shop with the handguard.
My favorite, my
That's
favorite thing I've ever done.
so good. Let's talk about it because yeah, it's in my mind as well. Like,
Yes, of course.
where did that idea sort of come from to do that particular scene, and also how long did it take you to put all that together, and just, what was the thought behind it?
So why we chose that particular scene, I think we wanted to just recreate an iconic moment from the game, but do it in a way that was like a bit of a rug pull. Because we used a female actress and it was you know, we weren't just being like, hey, this is Ryo Hazuki. We were kind of like approaching it a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah.
But I think I just chose to do that scene. I don't know. I think it was because I had already props, like a prop of the handguard, and I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, I'll do something with this because I might as well put this to some use. So I thought I would do that scene. I thought it was really cool. So I wrote a bit of a script and a shot list around that, and then there's actually, believe it or not, like very very close to my house, and I live in a rural area of about 9,000 people, and really close to where I live there is an Asian antique shop that
Okay.
is just perfect. So that was very serendipitous and that worked out the way it did. And yeah, like we talked to the owners there, they were happy to let us shoot. I built some extra props like the move scrolls that you kind of see peppered in the background. I don't
Yeah.
even know if people saw them.
Oh
And
yeah.
then I and then we got our friend Shaughnessy to, she was in town and she had done some stuff with us before, and we're like, hey, like this is what we want to do, you should be Rio, and then we'll do like this whole gender reveal switch thing at the end that kind of worked out nicely. And yeah, and then the male actor, again, a town of 9,000 people in rural Ontario, Canada. There we had a friend of mine whose dad is ethnically Japanese, that is kind of like around the age of like what an older antique shop man would be like. So it all just kind of like fell into place nicely.
Brilliant. That's great. Anybody hasn't watched it again, I'll sling up a little bit of footage from it. But again, it's a fantastic trailer. It just felt so reminiscent of the games, and the
Thank you.
handguard in it looked beautiful. And again, you mentioned the move scroll Easter eggs in there as well. So when you're watching it, keep your eye out for those.
I would like to say quickly, I did throw like like a literal Easter egg in in that trailer where you see the move scroll in the background on that shot of Shaughnessy's kind of that close up as she's approaching it before the bell rings.
Yeah.
And the move scroll, I think there's 3 move scrolls. I forget what 2 of them are. I just kind of copied the kanji from like 2 iconic moves from Shenmue 2. Um, I think I forget which game I took them from, but then the other one was the literal translation of I typed in Easter egg in like Google Translate and converted that to kanji, and then I think
Ah,
it came
brilliant.
out as like secret egg. So then we wrote that on there as like kind of like a meta Easter egg for the whole thing. I don't know if anybody caught that, but it's there,
Oh,
and it was like my little proud moment that I snuck that in. I was like, yeah, this is cool.
that's absolutely brilliant. And I don't know if it was anyone picked that up actually, but
I
if you
don't know if
haven't
they did
picked it
either.
up,
Yeah.
you know about it now. Brilliant. So obviously this project's morphed into something a lot bigger than its original idea from a 20-minute video that you were going to put together with a few fans. It's got into a lot something bigger. What were the challenges of getting this thing made to where we are now?
The challenge is, let's see. I mean, there's a ton. um, like just es- establishing yourself as somebody to be taken somewhat seriously, especially in those early days. Like it's easy enough to reach out to the voice actors and the fans and the YouTubers because they're more than happy to. But then when you're trying to breach that line to like people in the industry, like Peter Moore and Mike Fisher,
Yeah.
there's always that worry of like are they going to say yes, like because to them I'm just a random guy, I'm just a random fan. And I think that's what having definitive films on board really helped lend to the credibility behind that.
Yeah.
So like having them on board was able to alleviate some of those challenges, but just yeah, like the creative process and the time involved, and like you run into roadblocks with the editing and you get burnt out. um, and you come back to it and you think something's working and then you think it's not. And then I think at one point we had like, okay, here's 3 hours of content. A lot of it's probably gibberish. Then we have to start trimming it down to something that resembles an actual narrative. Um, and then also keeping in mind that we're not just making this, like, we are making it for the fans, but like I want to make it for the fans, but the rest of the team, the reason they signed on to do this in the first place is because they saw a potential of like an interesting story that would appeal to a wider audience of like
Yeah.
this super niche game that wasn't supposed to exist. But now it does because of this fan base. And like, let's also tell the story of how it came to be. And to do that, you don't just tell a story about Shenmue, but you have to tell a story about Sega and the Japanese arcade scene and Yu Suzuki, right? So it's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
having something that's both appeals to the fans and also to people who have no idea what Shenmue is or what an RPG video game is. There's a lot of balance to kind of find. So I think we landed on it. I showed my mom. Actually, she was the first person other than us to see the whole thing.
Yeah.
And she was like, I think she said to me, she was like, oh, like, I get it. Like, I get why you're so into it now. Like, I understand where this passion's coming from and like why it means so much to you. And then hearing that was like, I remember thinking in my head, like, thank you. Like, that's exactly what I wanted you to say.
That sounds really promising, and hopefully people who haven't seen Shenmue, obviously with the anime and everything else going on, if they see this and pick it up and go, do you know what, I get why this fan base was so vocal for 20 years, and pick the game up. It's doing its job.
Yeah. I remember at one point when I was watching the documentary with my mom, it got to the point where we're kind of leading up to the Kickstarter. And my mom, to be fair, like, she knows really nothing about, like, she knows what I was doing, but I don't think she really understood what it all meant or kind of what, because it's all very foreign to her.
Yeah.
So at one point she turns to me, she pauses it and she turns to me, she's like, do you think they're ever going to make a Shenmue 3? And like, she was very invested in the story at this point. She was like, do you think they're ever going to make a third one? And I was like, keep watching. And then obviously we talk about it, of course, and just seeing her reaction to all that was really cool. Like, she understood finally the weight of not just my weight, but all of our collective, angst that we had built up with this whole series. Like, I think she was finally able to understand why it meant so much to me and everyone else.
Brilliant. That's really cool to hear. And I will bring in the Kickstarter actually as well, because that is a challenging format. I think Wisenet would attest to that as well as yourself. What were the challenges around doing it through Kickstarter in terms of logistics, backers and the rewards, etc.?
Yeah, I guess like building it and trying to make a reward list that is appealing to people. Sometimes, I hope we didn't like promise too much or maybe offer too much, but then not charge enough to kind of where, like, sometimes I wonder if I just said it's a digital thing with a minimum contribution of $50, would people have jumped on it? Because that would have been a lot easier to pull off ultimately in the long run, if I'm being honest. But yeah, kind of having those things, and which are easy enough to deliver on, but like with all Kickstarters, like, there is, as much as I love everyone who donated, I appreciate every single one of you, there are some people who I think just don't see that, like, hey, we're just people making this in our spare time. Like, this isn't our full-time gig. You didn't order from a website. Like, we're literally trying to get this made, and we were being very transparent. We probably could have made more frequent updates, but it was getting to the point where those updates would have been like, hey guys, we're still plugging along, thanks, like, I have nothing major to show here. So I think that's why even when we showed the cut of what we had, like that hour and however many minute like content cut where we were getting close to a finished story, that was our way of being like, this isn't a Ponzi scheme, like, we're actually trying to make this happen, so just please be patient. But yeah, like with all things like that, it is challenging because there's a lot of people that are kind of depending and counting on us to pull this off. So
yeah, and do you think, to a point, backer expectation all came into that as well, in terms of people wanting things almost immediately and not necessarily understanding the process behind it, which I hope part of this interview can do for people who maybe weren't so sure about what was going on behind the scenes, can start to understand that actually it's not just film, edit, done. There's much more to this than and your own blood, sweat and tears as well, in fact.
Right, and lots of caffeine and lots of self-doubt and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, you're exactly right though. Like there is a lot more that goes in behind the scenes, and I think for the most part, I think people did understand that. And let's face it, like as Shenmue fans, we're really, really good at waiting. So it's always funny when people like reached out to me on the side and were just like reassuring, like, hey, like don't worry, Adam. Like I literally waited 15 years for Shenmue 3, so like take your time, it's fine. That always put a smile on my face. I was like, okay, I shouldn't be super hard on ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And what's the status of the project currently? Where are we at right now?
So happy and excited to announce that I don't know when, but like very, very soon, because we did put the finishing touches on. Like the last thing we're working on is the credits and getting all the names in there and
Yeah,
the photos and whatnot of the fans submitted. But we'll be able to send out to the backers a like a code that will get them access to like the digital copy of the
yeah,
film, so they could watch the whole thing in full and see it and watch it and experience it the way that my mom did um, last weekend, and hopefully have that same sort of like reaction that she did, that seeing it all come together. I'm just excited for people to finally be able to see it. So that's kind of the status. When the physical stuff, that will all um, take some more time, but we want to get this out as soon as possible and start fulfilling on some of the promises that we made.
yeah. Oh, I can't wait! Can't wait. Oh, that's whetting the appetite. That is. Oh, I can't wait to see that because it's been a long journey for it,
it's
and
it's it has been a very long journey. It's weird watching it too, watching, because I don't know if we touched on this, but the story that I wanted to tell setting out had nothing to do with me. I was just
mm,
the person kind of like behind the scenes pulling the strings. But because I got a lot of really awesome content and like vlogs that I had made with Peter while in Japan and while going on
yeah,
this, originally I was shooting that kind of just for me
yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe to use whatever. But I remember when we were editing, I had submitted an edit to Isaac for him to review, and he was like, man, you have all this great footage of like you in Japan, like why aren't you using any of that? And I'm like, I don't know, because it's not about me, like it's about Shenmue and like the journey of Shenmue. And I think he said to me, he was like, you are literally on a journey and like you have footage of it. And he's like, there's some, and he was explaining how there's room to do like sort of just juxtaposition of like the journey of like Shenmue, not just Shenmue 3 in the game, but like also the fans and also me, and have it all tie in together. So I kind of bit the bullet and I was like, yes, okay, let's do it. So you'll see a lot of Peter and I kind of interspersed throughout bits of the film. We kind of come back as like as a recurring arc, but it all plays into a purpose.
I
But yeah.
I do remember some of that from the preview you gave us the other year,
Hmm.
actually, and some of those are. It's so interesting to see like, Shenmue fans on that journey around Japan to reach everything. If you, as a Shenmue fan, as somebody who wants to go and do that, I'm sat there. I don't know. It's just making me want to do it more, and that's the only way I
Hmm.
can describe it from the little footage that we saw sort of a year, 18 months ago. So I can't wait to see the final product.
Thank you. I would love to hear what you have to say when you watch it. I'd love to hear your feedback and just yeah, hear all that good stuff.
So one of the other things around the project is all the backer rewards, content, etc. Did you have a challenge getting all that together in terms of I know people with their like for example I did a very sort of I think 2 minute shot of me talking about why I love Shenmue etc. Was that difficult to get together and put all together because I know it's all going to be on the Blu-ray, isn't it, when it comes out?
It'll actually be on the digital version as well, so
Oh
those people will
really?
be able to see. Yep.
Excellent.
And yours, I just want to say you did a really good job of yours, because you adhered. I think yours was like 30 minutes on the frame, or 30 seconds on the frame, which I appreciate that. Like yours was just so tight and concise. Um, and yeah, but no, that's all in there. I think I'm waiting for a few other people, but I think that's another good part about having the digital link is if you didn't get to me in time, or if your name is spelt wrong, or if you didn't have your proper name listed that you wanted,
Yeah,
you'll be able to kind of like let me know, and then I can make all those changes for the actual physical edition. But
excellent.
yeah, that that part wasn't so hard. The hardest part really was parting with that signed Dreamcast
Oh
that
man.
was that I
Yeah.
had delivered to. I don't want to say the name. He's an active member on the forum. He's probably posted a picture of it, but he was the one who snagged that top tier. And I sent him that a while ago, but I took some pictures and I uploaded it to my Facebook just to show
Yeah, I
just some of
remember
my
that.
close friends. Yeah. And it's just parting with that was so tough. And then everyone was like, why didn't you bring two? It's like, I don't know. I don't want to be the guy bringing two Dreamcasts with me everywhere I go. I would just seem like a total weirdo. But it's definitely a one of a kind item, and I know that that's going to be a nice little collector's piece for that guy.
That would take pride of place somewhere in my collection if I had it. I can tell you, I'm
Hmm.
very jealous.
Yeah, yeah. It was nice being able to say I was the proud owner of it for a while.
Brilliant, excellent, I love it. So, in between all of this, and you're making the project, you're making the film, Shenmue 3 releases
Hmm.
to the world. What did you think of it when you actually got round to playing it?
Well, I will say that it is both my favorite and my least favorite of the Shenmue games. And I mean that, I know it's very vague in the way I'm putting it, but there are elements of that game that worked so well. Um, the atmosphere and just like the level design and like the feeling of life that was in it
Yeah,
really resonated with me, and I got very, very lost in just like running around the different areas, listening to the music. I kind of even went big into like the fishing and the herb collecting and the
yeah,
capsule collecting, which is something I didn't do. I think part of the reason I didn't do it as much in the first two games was like, let's face it, I understand they were going for realism, but like to make it so I couldn't just buy multiple like that was a nice little quality of life change. So I was able to
mm,
kind of like quickly buy these things. I went down those roads and invested a lot of time just like living in that world. And the story, it's I have my ups and downs with it, but
yeah,
I think it fell flat in some areas, but
of
I think it
course.
delivered in others. But yeah, I think it's very much a Shenmue game, and the only thing I'll say about it is I think it was playing to the fans a little too much. Like it felt like it was too much for the fans, with
Yeah.
like the little references. But you know what? Like I get it. That's kind of it was made because of the fans. So if if they didn't include those like little winks and nudges and whatnot, then I don't know. I think people would have felt kind of cheated. But yeah, I don't know. That's my stance on it. It's it's the best and the least favorite of the Shenmue games.
I think you've probably summed up the whole Shenmue community's view of Shenmue 3 in about a minute and a half. I don't disagree with anything you said.
I I hope so. I've only ever played it once. I will eventually do the replay of the full three again, but right now I've done the one and done, and that's just kind of my thoughts on playing it through the one time.
Have you not played 1 to 3 back to back then?
Oh no, I have.
You have.
The first time I played it was back to back. Was I bought the first one, but I was kind of working my way, or I bought the third one and I was working my way through
Ah,
one and
okay.
two. Yeah, I was sitting on my little entertainment area while I was finishing up Shenmue 2, and then the second it was done, I was like, okay, boom, Shenmue 3 in, and then right into it.
Brilliant. And that transition, actually, I did 1 to 3 back to back a while back. And actually, the feeling from Shenmue 2 to 3, it's almost like the 20-year gap didn't happen. It felt natural. It just fitted. I don't know. It felt familiar. It's probably the way I'd put it.
It did, yeah. I'm glad that they kind of opened up. The only negative thing I'll say though is it's like, guys, did we not forget that there was a floating magic sword? Like, why is this not more? Why aren't you not making a bigger deal about this?
Wow, that sort of feeds in actually to the other piece of Shenmue media that we've just got, which also retconned the sword. Um, the Shenmue anime.
Yes.
Oh my god, how good is that anime?
Oh, it's I feel like it was made like it's gonna sound lame, but it was made like specifically for me. It was like they were like, okay, this is what Adam wants in a Shenmue anime, so we're gonna just give him this. And I've been listening to that Is it Undead Noid? Is that the name of the
Yes,
artist? Oh, it's
yeah.
just such a good song.
Oh man, it gets stuck in your head every time that plays in the sort of starting credits. I'm humming it for hours.
Yeah, it's definitely a catchy tune. I've been sending it to all my friends too, who they're big into like the more popular animes, and I'm like, hey, like you want to watch Shenmue? Like it's really really good. I think you'll like it. You should check it out.
It's really good. I know it moves at a pace. I mean, as we're recording this, we're just about to step off the boat into Hong Kong. I mean, does the pacing of the anime bother you? Like some of the changes they made, or what do you think of them?
No, I mean, as soon as I knew that they were going to be like 22-minute episodes, I fully expected. I was like, oh yeah, they're not going to have a whole episode on Rio looking for Charlie. Like that's not going to happen. It is moving very quickly, but it kind of has to, right? It's an anime that is on a being published by, right. It's on Crunchyroll. It's
Yeah,
Adult Swim is involved.
yeah,
Um, so it needs to appeal to a wider audience, and that means you have to cram in more story and more action sequences. But no, the pacing isn't really bothering me because, right, like as a guy who has a newborn and who has a job and who's always very very busy, I like being able to just wake up and crush an episode of the anime in like under a half hour, which is
yeah.
great. So I appreciate it like that. If this was like a Netflix epic and each episode was like 45 minutes to an hour, I would still love it, but I would not be caught up. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. And I think they've done a hell of a job. I mean, some of the Easter eggs in there are brilliant, like the tapes on Rio's desk.
Oh yeah, those first 2 or 3 episodes, I feel they were just like packed full of references that I was just eating up because I had binged a bunch of episodes at once. I think it was like four. I started watching the series once there was 4 episodes, so I just kind of like crushed it all. I woke up. My daughter was crying at like 5 in the morning, so I woke up, did that thing with her, put her to bed, and I'm like, I'm awake. Might as well have coffee and just crush the anime, which was amazing.
Yeah, some of those Easter eggs are amazing. It's like they were made for us. I
Right.
think they've struck that balance actually. I think from appeasing, a long in the tooth fan base, been around a long time, and bringing new people in. And I think actually with the release of a gamer's journey as well, that can all sort of feed into hopefully getting some more people interested in Shenmue the games, which is what we all want at the end of the day. More Shenmue games.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we want Shenmue 4 and we want people to just understand why we want those games and first
Absolutely.
for them to share in that passion as well.
So it sort of feeds into my next question then.
Yeah.
If there is a Shenmue 4, and I'm hopeful that we will see one, judging on the buzz that's around the anime and Yu Suzuki's Wisenet are doing something. I don't know what, but they are making something. That came out of an interview just this afternoon, in fact. If Shenmue 4 does come, will we see a part two to Gamer's Journey?
Oh, gamers, I mean, as much as I would probably love to dive back into that world, I might just have to make this my one and done uh, contribution to the Shenmue community in terms of what I do. I don't know if I would have it in me to do a part two, nor would I think a part two would be warranted. Um, I
Fair.
think I think somebody else could come along and maybe tell a better, more intricate story that ties Shenmue ties the whole Shenmue world together. Probably they could do it better, but at least that we'll be able to say that we were the first ones to do it. And I think what we did had heart and soul to it. And it's not just a movie about a game, but it's about like the gamers as well. So, I,
Superb.
mm-hmm.
And my final question to close us off, I think, and thank you, Adam, for taking the time to join me today. It's been an absolute hell of a ride, and I cannot wait to get on that documentary and watch it. I will be waiting by my emails for that Kickstarter update. I can tell you, and then I will be disappearing into the depths of my office to watch it when it does come. There's actually two questions
Yeah.
with it. The first question is obviously when all the Kickstarter fulfillment's done, are you hoping to get it out onto market? Where can people pick it up if possible?
Would love to. I just don't know what that would look like. It would be really cool if I mean, if somebody like a Netflix or an Amazon were to come along and we can get it on that platform. I just don't know if there would be interest in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I would definitely love for more people to be able to pick it up. I just can't say for sure like what that would be or how it would look.
That's fair. Stay tuned, I think is probably the word we'd use for that. You never know.
Probably the best one, yeah.
Yeah. And the last one is to sort of round us off, and I do this with everybody, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, is
Sure.
do you have a message to sign us off for the Shenmue community?
Oh, is it too cliche if I just say let's get Shenmue 4?
No, it is not cliche to say that.
No, I'll say that, and then just I don't know, just the sign off messages. I just want to say that everyone who is a fan of Shenmue, I just hope you guys know that you're part of like one of, if not like the most passionate communities out there of people. And yeah, it's been a shared experience, and I think we all just need to give ourselves a round of applause for sticking with it this whole time, because we pulled off the impossible.
We did. And it's now led to a game and an anime, and God knows what else in between, but we'll see.
Right.
Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to join me this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure to get you on. Thank you to everybody who obviously takes the time to listen to these interviews. Make sure you do give us a follow over on the social medias and on the YouTube. And we'll be back with another interview very soon. Take care and goodbye.
Ah, look at the time.